Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luca. Luca, somehow, some way, we survived the first NFL free weekend. We are on the back end now of the second NFL free weekend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, we're once again, just enjoying the off season kind of deal. People that will be listening to this by the time it's released will know kind of where my primary viewership has been of late. And we will know what the result was of both the Friday and Sunday games of the U.S. men's hockey team results in the Olympics. Off season's been good. It's one of those things where we're sitting here having the discussions we were like last week, kicking off our season 5 of this podcast, discussing just fun ideas or just potential ideas of bringing in players to this roster and seeing what it could eventually develop in when it comes to targets for Josh Allen in the 2026 season. And then we're going to sit here and just evaluate now, anyone that could potentially be leaving, and would we want them back? How do we feel about them? Stuff like that, where it's, I feel as if being in the seat that we are with how the season ended previously, I don't think I could be in a better mood in the sense of even the hardship of another season falling short. I barely recall kind of the Super Bowl that happened. That is Super Bowl 60. I just know that Seattle finished on top, and I'm not upset about anything. And I'm just looking forward, and I look forward to when football's back. But it's that rare time where I'm also okay with football being gone for the time being to kind of reset the brain and fandom ways of things. That we're doing good on this wonderful weekend that is mid-February.
We talk a lot about this off season, and the NFL has a way of just like getting right back in your face very, very abruptly. The combine is right around the corner. And then the first or second week of March is NFL free agency. And then that's usually a couple weeks that really gets you through. And then by the time free agency cools down, you're in April and you're looking right ahead to the draft. OTAs are starting up, and then you're planning summer vacations, and all of a sudden the Bills are in St. John's Fisher. But, Luca, before we get to all of that, we talked about 10 trades the Bills could make last week. And, we got some pretty good responses on that. And I think timing wise, it was good. I saw Joe Marino put out a similar list. I know WGR has been talking a lot about that. So I thought this week it would be important for us before we start drooling over the out of house options. Let's take a look at what we have in house, at least for a few more weeks. What is currently slated to leave, and do we want it to stay? Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills pending unrestricted and, I suppose, restricted free agents. And we're not going to spend as much time on like the third string corner as we will on, the primary edge rusher. But we're going to go down the list. We're going to have some conversations on some key people, and we'll kind of tell you where our head's at as who the Bills should keep and who they should let go. Luca, let's start it off with Joey Bosa. He was on a one-year deal for the Bills. He won your Game Check Award on the final season edition of Bills Chat. He finished the season with 5 sacks. Impressively, he played in 15 games, so injuries were not a concern for Bosa. Ultimately, though, just an average season when it comes to pressure rate and speed of pressure, I know is a stat that a lot of people have been talking about. And now you're talking about a scheme change with Jim Leonard. Where's your head at with the Bills bringing back or interest in bringing back Joey Bosa?
Minimal interest. Joey Bosa, you mentioned the 5 sacks, 4 of them all previous, what was it, week 9 and earlier, or week 8 and earlier, right around that midseason cut. So down the stretch, even though he was healthy and available, or we'll call it healthy. Of course, everyone is a little bit banged up as you continue through the NFL season. Just his ability to impact the game as a true pass rusher was not there. And now you're adding the factor of a true change in scheme and philosophy from a defensive side of things. I don't see where it matches up for Joey Bosa. His market value, we're going to be pulling that a lot from Spot Track. You take it with a grain of salt, just like you would with PFF or anything else. The Spot Track market value has him at 13.7 mil. That's not breaking the bank for an edge rusher by any stretch, but it's not cheap either. And the return on investment with Joey Bosa, who will be 31 during the season, it just doesn't make sense to me at all in any capacity that unless he were to take a severely lower number than what is projected to be his value on, certain sites, I just don't see where it makes sense. Minimal interest. It was something that was enticing when it was signed last offseason. This year, I just don't. I wouldn't understand where the mindset would be moving forward with Joey Bosa because it just didn't fix that need for us moving, with last season. So just it's going to be something where I imagine due to the defensive change side of things, we're going to see a lot more change on the defensive side of the ball personnel wise than would be expected. And Joey Bosa absolutely would be one of those guys who most likely will not be wearing a Bills uniform again.
Yeah, and you did say like Spot Track, you have to take their valuation with a grain of salt, but it is a metric we can use. And 13 million average annual salary on a multi-year deal. I mean, you're talking about in year one, probably 6 or 7 million against the cap. Brandon Bean can certainly throw some void years on there and make it even more palatable. But one theme I'm going to have tonight, particularly with starters, particularly with guys that we're talking about, that if you keep them, you expect big things from, is are they a game changer? If they're not a game changer, I almost have no interest in these guys staying at this point. Now, the conversation will certainly change when it comes to guys like Cam Lewis, who are just depth players that play a role on this team. But in the case of Joey Bosa, even though you're talking about a medium level contract for a player, we have seen with the wide receiver position when you spend a medium level contract on a Curtis Samuel, then you do the same thing on a Joshua Palmer and the same thing on a Khalil Shakir. All of a sudden, you can't afford to spend a max deal on a player that is a game changer. So, with that in mind, with the way we saw his play really fall off the cliff ever since that second Patriots game, more splash play than consistency, and Jim Leonard's words about how we are going to stop the run. Hello, Joey Bosa. That was something that bothered Luka from the first game of the season and kept getting worse and worse. We are aligned in this. I mean, all of these conversations will end with the caveat of if he wants to come back at a bargain basement deal, I would certainly take a free Joey Bosa. But if we're talking about the market value that we anticipate Joey Bosa getting, I would rather him be somebody else's investment in 2026. All right, so one down. Let's go back to the defensive side of the ball. Let's go back to the defensive line. 34-year-old Daquan Jones. He has been a stalwart on the interior of this defensive line since the Bills brought him in 2021. But I think even though he has maintained a starter's level position on this defense, he has been very inconsistent in recent years, has not been an impact player. And once Ed Oliver went down, it was really Deion Walker and everybody else at defensive tackle. And unfortunately for me, Daquan Jones is part of that everybody else. Now, Spot Track only views Daquan Jones as a sub $2 million a year player, which is essentially vet minimum. That would surprise me. If you can get him back at vet minimum, I suppose competing for a spot. But my thoughts on Daquan Jones, and I hate to see him fall off this much, is I almost don't want to burn the roster spot on him at this point. To me, we're changing defensive scheme. We're changing defensive personnel. He's been front and center on a defensive line that we've been talking about cannot stop the run. And he's been the nose tackle and the three technique in multiple instances. So, at this point, I think change of scenery would do both Daquan Jones and the Bills good.
I'm with you on it 100%. I just think, again, at least with Daquan Jones, he was a great servant for the Bills for years. As you mentioned, the inconsistencies were starting to get there. This past season and even the season before, injuries probably played a role in that, of course. But then on top of it, it's just, you mentioned the age. That's the big thing with Daquan Jones, 34 years old. If you need a nose tackle in order to effectively stop the run with what it feels like is going to be happening with this new defense, Daquan Jones doesn't truly fit that mold to me, as well as to what you would be looking for in that, let's call it 34 base nose tackle position. That's just, he isn't quite the guy you're looking for that, in my opinion. And then as well on top of it, it's just the age and what you've seen out of him, even when he has played with his defense. Thank you for the years of service kind of deal, but we are going to look elsewhere. Maybe just, stay close to the phone. There's potential that you're not getting signed from anywhere, and you could be a mid-season bring in if we just need a healthy body while you recover yourself away from the field for a little bit. Who knows? That would be more where I'd have the mindset with Daquan Jones. Like the roster spot comment you make is pretty much exactly where I'm at. Whereas, you could view him as stay close by. If you find a practice squad or whatever that is willing to roster you, cool. But also at the same time, we're willing to bring you back if injury bug bites us again, because you at least can come in here and the facilities and stuff. That is the mindset with the Daquan Jones. You are not looking at him as part of the initial wave of roster spots you're trying to fill, because the marriage might not make sense with this new scheme and the new philosophy on defense. And on top of it, just age and everything as such with the player himself and the play. It just isn't quite up to snuff from what you're going to be able to potentially get elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remind folks, like Sean McDermott is gone, Bobby Babich is gone, and the familiarity aspect that would have been beneficial to someone like Daquan Jones is not there anymore. As you were talking about practice squad, I was thinking to myself, he could be the new age Jordan Phillips, where he's the guy that hangs on the practice squad for a few years. But why would Jim Leonard care any more about Daquan Jones than some random free agent from Denver he can get? Luka, just for your reference, I have now sorted the Spot Track column by predicted market value to give us a little bit better rundown of the order of these guys. I realized Daquan Jones second on our list. Something was off, and we will now keep it trucking. With, I think, maybe the most important conversation this offseason, the offensive line. The Bills have two offensive linemen who are free agents. They are David Edwards and Connor McGovern. We can kind of have this conversation together, but really it's a three-person conversation because O'Cyrus Torrence is coming up for a contract in 2027. So if you are of the mind that you want to extend O'Cyrus Torrence, that could impact what you do with David Edwards and Connor McGovern. So I'll tell you where I'm at with these three. I like David. I think David Edwards played his best football under Aaron Kromer. If Spot Track's valuation is even remotely close of having him nearly at $20 million, best of luck to you. I am super happy for you and your family, and I hope you get that, and I hope it's not from the Buffalo Bills. The O'Cyrus Torrence piece of this matters very, very little to me. I am not an O'Cyrus Torrence guy. I think he's a baseline starter. I think he's been a solid second-round pick. He's played in the games. He hasn't missed a lot of time, and he's been solid, but I've always been waiting for him to take a jump and be spectacular. So I would not hold off on doing anything with Edwards and McGovern, thinking that O'Cyrus Torrence is going to take a leap. With that being said, the guy that I would look to keep here, if you could, I would not force it because, man, it's a weak center class, as Linderbaum, the guy from Baltimore, is the top of the class. And after that, it is empty out there. Ben Solak put an article out there last week about that. If you can get McGovern at that $16 million AAV, I know that's heavy, and spread it out, let Bean work his contract magic with it and make it comfortable, put some void years on the back end. I'd like to see him stick around because I'm not overly interested in seeing a new center while we break in a new guard and then O'Cyrus Torrence maybe on the last year of his deal. So if I was choosing between Edwards and McGovern, it's an easy choice for me, even though I think they're similar level players. I would take McGovern and I would let Edwards go. And then if for whatever reasons, Luka, O'Cyrus Torrence evolves this year into a star guard, that's a good problem to have, and I'll figure it out down the road. We'll sign him. We'll make the money work, and we'll have a star in-house. But I'm not going to assume that and let a solid option at center go. So I would like to see them keep McGovern in-house. Let Edwards see if he can make close to that money on the open market and not factor Torrence into this deal whatsoever.
The open market money that's estimated for Edwards has me scratching my head a little bit. I think David Edwards has been fine. Don't get me wrong, but to project him close to 20 million AAV is something that I don't think it's hard to palate if you're the Bills. I don't see the play matching the price. Whereas Connor McGovern, you can absolutely convince yourself that 16 mil for McGovern services. He hasn't even hit 30, although that's coming soonish. He is 28. That you'll see the return on investment that you would like to with him, and you can figure out the guard stuff elsewhere. There are more guards around the league and in free agency or in the draft than you will be able to find competent, ready to go centers. It's one of those things where the skill that is the offensive line across the board is deteriorating. But at the same time, being a center is even more difficult now than it's ever been. And you have one that's proven to work with your superstar quarterback, and he calls the shots from that position. If you can do that on the cheaper comparative to David Edwards, I don't see where the argument is. And your point about one or the other or both or neither based on O'Cyrus Torrence as well, being not linked, is 100% spot on, in my opinion. O'Cyrus Torrence is a kind of standalone, need to keep evaluating that process with him. As you said, I think we're in agreement. I've been fine with O'Cyrus Torrence. I think baseline starter, okay starter, everything like that's good. Once in a while, you might see him both do something a little bit nicer, but then also there are times he slips up, things of that nature. He is the biggest boy on the line as it stands currently right now, though. And it's hard to see beef go, we'll call it. But his price tag, what you're going to have to do to retain him, whatever it is, should not be on the forefront of the mind of being and anyone making this decision on retaining David Edwards and or retaining Connor McGovern. I think those are two different discussions. I do think, though, if you're trying to balance the books and figure out the finances, there is a world that feels extremely realistic that you're seeing David Edwards walk out, test the market, and you're just going to live with that decision, get Connor McGovern back, and then figure out the guard position from there. It feels like a much more realistic way to handle this, both from a financial impact way and it's just personnel decisions overall. You can find another David Edwards before you find another Connor McGovern. And long of it there, short of it there is Connor McGovern can also be an individual that slides the guard if for whatever reason you solve the center position, whereas David Edwards could slide to center, but why would you really want to mess with that either? He just lives in the guard space, and Connor McGovern's been there, done that. You trust with what you have, you figure out the secondary thing, and guards just feel like something, in my opinion, that you're going to be able to either find out there more in the open market and or be able to develop and work around, because you have, in David Edwards' case, you have a Deion Dawkins sitting there as your bookend left tackle, Connor McGovern on his right shoulder at center, and then two other established guys to the right of Connor McGovern that know their job. So it'd be much more feasible and easy to bring in a new guard in that left guard spot and try to get them the understanding to what the role, what the job, what the responsibilities are, rather than doing the opposite and having your guards and tackles good, but you're figuring out the snap, you're figuring out everything that's coming from the center position that might not be as smooth moving forward while you're still in, let's call it for what it is, a championship window since you have Josh Allen. That's the ultimate thing here.
One in-house option the Bills were supposed to have was Cedric Van Pran Granger, who by all accounts was considered a steal of a fifth-round prospect 2 years ago. But the problem is, whether it's training camp injuries or just lack of ability to play during the regular season due to the overall health of the offensive line, there's been such a minimal opportunity to evaluate him. And then Aaron Kromer leaves this offseason. I don't know how the Bills could have a good feel for whether Van Pran Granger could handle the brunt of the center role, and certainly well enough to let Connor McGovern go and feel good about it. So I do think that's something they're gonna have to kick down the road. I think in an ideal world, they would sign McGovern to a similar deal like they got Terrell Bernard on, both like structure wise, where first 2 years are guaranteed. After about year 3, you can start to hop out of it if you need to. And then by then, let's say O'Cyrus Torrence does become a star, then his money kicks in. Or if Van Pran Granger shows himself to be a provable, capable center, well, then you have the last year of his rookie deal and you can let McGovern go. And then one last thing, I know Joe Brady mentioned a lot about Sean Payton. He comes from the Sean Payton tree. That would be a mark for Osiris Torrance. Historically, Sean Payton has had massive guards. You look at Quinn Miners in Denver, and Osiris Torrance certainly fits that prototype. That is maybe something that David Edwards lacks. So I think we're seeing eye to eye here. It would surprise me if David Edwards plays another snap for the Bills, unless Spot Track is just way off on their valuation for him, or the league just doesn't see it that way. I do think McGovern would be the one they would keep. It would not shock me if both leave. And it would not shock me if they value Cyrus Torrance way more than you and I do. But that will be one of the most interesting stories of this offseason. All right. AJ Epinesa, 27 years old, is going into his third contract. Will that be with the Buffalo Bills? We shall see. He is a guy that has been a strong rotational piece for the Bills, never really developed into a starter that the Bills hoped they were getting when they took him in 2020, a second round out of Iowa, when many thought he could go in the first round. They took him from a 300-pound college player to a 240-pound NFL player. They've reshaped his body, they've rebuilt his game, and now they've reshaped the scheme. I like Epinesa. I think he's more of a hustle player than a difference-making player. I do think he has the length to overwhelm really bad tackles in the league, but I'm not sure he does much against the good tackles. If they could get him back cheap, I would be in favor of it. I don't have much interest, though, in hitting that $6 million AAV that SpotTrack projects. Where do you fit on AJ Epinesa?
Aligned once again. I will say there is an argument to be had, though, when it comes to the shift to what we will be seeing on defense, or what it feels like we will be seeing on defense, that maybe that could suit him just a little bit more, truly giving him that he would be in that outside backer role, that outside edge role, where you would see him truly on the outside of a tackle always. You would never see him kind of living in a space where he could potentially be on a strong side of a line that would see him absolutely overwhelmed by tackle and even guard support, anything like that. It's one where maybe it makes a lot of sense. You mentioned him kind of cutting down his frame, cutting down his overall weight, and maybe that combination with this scheme change could actually uncrack what feels like Epinesa has 2-3 games a season where you can see those splashes, those big play moments, and you're like, okay, there's a guy here, there's a dog here, whatever it is. The London game, what was that, 2 seasons ago? Cincy game last year, I believe he had a couple big plays, of course, in there. Stuff like that, where it's like there is someone who can make plays in here, but I would agree that 90 whatever percent of the time you're sitting there just going, there's a reason he's rotational piece in. There's a reason, you never see him break through and really make it feel like you can make an argument that he should be leaned on more. And at 6 million, I don't look at that as breaking the bank by any stretch. And if it were to work, if we were to see him come back for that, what feels like essentially the same price tag as he was previously at 27 going on 28, I'm not going to, throw my hands in the air and be overly upset about it. But also I'm not sitting here banging the drum saying we need to bring him back. It's a very indifferent feeling I have in AJ Epinesa. He's definitely the first one, though, on the list of kind of defenders and things like that, where I go, I can see if they, if Leonard is sitting there saying, I have an idea of what to use him for, I can see that. And I can then see him coming back. And that's fine with me. That is A-okay. If there is a vision on how to use him, that's great. And I would love to hear that. But I just, being that we are sitting on the outside looking in, I'm very, very, very indifferent. I wouldn't say I'm negative against it or all for it. It's just baseline, middle of the road. Just we'll have to see what happens with AJ Epinesa. If he goes, see ya. If he stays, all right. What's the idea with him then moving forward?
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. The next name on this list, I don't think will take very long at all. Larry Ogunjobi is going to be 32 years old. He came to the Bills last year via free agency, and then he had the suspension that caught us all by surprise, missed the first 6 games. Ultimately, down the stretch, he was a healthy scratch for Federi and Mathis before being a surprise active in the playoff game against Denver. Spotrac has his valuation at $5 million a year, which I don't know how you could watch Larry Ogunjobi and Daquan Jones and have Larry Ogunjobi as being triple as good as him. But hey, what do I know? Luka, any interest in bringing back Larry Ogunjobi?
See ya later. You are the thorn in the side of Brandon Bean's 2025 free agency class. You absolutely burnt him, and every step of the way, never showed any sort of serious impact that you needed to as one of the more, we'll call it marquee signings. That's a stretch. It's not like, you're sitting there. We were clamoring about Larry Ogunjobi. I mean, when the suspensions came, Michael Hoyt being suspended was more of the concern than it was Larry Ogunjobi. It was just because he got suspended, do we still keep him around? What is going on with this? So on and so forth. He showed that, coming here being active after the 6-game suspension, we weren't missing much. And then for the fact that practice squad guys were able to show more significant impact than you, why would I rationalize paying $5 million to a guy who will be turning 32 during the season? That just doesn't make sense at all. Ogunjobi, see you later.
He's out of here. I think a little bit more interesting conversation is going to be Matt Milano, a 31-year-old player for the Bills. He has 9 years in the league. Holy cow, where has time gone? Spot Trek only has his market value at $4 million annual. And as the season wore on last year, Luka, Matt Milano started really showing signs of the Milano of 2 or 3 years ago. Now they have a scheme change. Where's your head at with Matt Milano?
He is definitely the more confusing one. I think Matt Milano as a inside linebacker in a 3-4 could work okay. If you're combining it with someone who's going to be front foot forward, like a Dorian Williams or whatever it is, you need a true opposites in contrast in play style, while also Matt Milano is going to be 31. Always concerns about his health, things of that nature, where do I think 4.5 million is much to be committing to a Matt Milano type when you can get some of the results that we were, as you mentioned, late in the season? No, not at all. I think 4.5 million is very palatable and makes a lot of sense for a guy of his capabilities and ceiling. It's just a lot of question marks where I don't see Matt Milano being someone that's going to be like day 1, day 2 free agency market, hitting the market and signing somewhere. So that's one where I think you can kind of play with the idea of exploring what else is out there. And then if it just doesn't feel like everything's checking the boxes the way you want it to, the guys aren't available that, Leonard's kind of out there seeking for that role, Matt Milano feels like a really nice plan B if he's willing to take a lower money than he was this past season, being that 6.3 mil that he was previously on. So that's where I'm kind of like, I absolutely am A-okay with Matt Milano coming back. It's just, it shouldn't be your plan A in that scenario. And 2, the finances of it being what it's projecting makes it sound okay. Is that true and real? That's something time will tell.
Yeah, and I think another thing that could play into this is what do they view of Terrell Bernard? Was last year an issue where he was, just banged up and couldn't get healthy and they still believe there's a good player in there? Or do they think he's damaged goods? Because I do think when you look at this scheme shift, they could be duplicative players playing the same weak inside linebacker position. And if you don't have much faith in Terrell Bernard holding down that role, then you are bare there. And then you're looking at bringing back Matt Milano or the next guy we're going to talk about, skipping a little bit, but keeping it on topic, Shaq Thompson, who filled a major hole for the Bills this year, had some big plays in the playoffs, a tackle for loss, an interception. His market value is $2.3 million. He has been vocal on Twitter saying he thinks he's a scheme fit for this Jim Leonard defense. It's hard for me to see the Bills bringing back Shaq Thompson and Matt Milano, but I at the risk of just repeating what you just said about Milano, he seems like a perfect, if plan A doesn't work out, let's circle back to Shaq Thompson and see if he can come back and get one of those two back in house. And I don't think there's going to be a bunch of teams beating down the door for Shaq Thompson on day 1 or day 2. I don't know if you have anything else to add that I just repeated what you said about Milano, but you're shaking your head no. So I think we're pretty much aligned on those two. Good player, good find for the Bills last year, but scheme change, I think they're going to be aiming to do better. Let's talk about backup quarterback. Mitchell Trubisky is a free agent. We do know that the NFL is in this weird spot where there's more starting positions than there are starting caliber quarterbacks. Tua has fallen essentially off the face of the earth when it comes to that conversation. Now we're talking about someone like Malik Willis getting $30 million a year from the Dolphins. All of that points to potentially some team looking at a guy like Mitch Trubisky, and can he come in and compete for a spot? Maybe not long term, but maybe get us through 8 games like a Joe Flacco type. Spot Track has his value at $4 million. What do you do with Money Mitch?
He's coming back. He's coming back. The QB room is no secret as to what they look for, what Joe Brady wants, what Josh Allen wants, everything of that nature. You want a guy who's been in it, can operate the day-to-day from practice, opposite of Josh, do whatever it is needed, and then from there also see the game and understand the message and understand everything that's going on, that can be there on the bench with Josh, looking at the tablet, just kind of conversating, feeling out the game, the emotions, riding the emotional roller coaster that is an NFL game, and kind of seeing it through. And Mitch clearly sees eye to eye with Josh in a very good way. I don't see Mitch Trubisky kind of being the twinkle in anyone's eyes out there. I think that ship sailed the moment that he was incapable of doing anything of note with the Steelers a few years ago, where then they turned to Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett is no great player of his own, but also it was just like Trubisky's play was not good enough to even get them through 4 or 5 games, that they had to go to this rookie Kenny Pickett and go from there. So I feel safe with where Trubisky is. The 4.4 mil number, to me, it's not like insulting or do I think it's too much. That's probably just an evaluate on kind of the mid to high end backup, what it would cost. And from there, I mean, I could see it being anywhere between the same exact number he was at 2.6 to the 4.4, whatever it is. That, like, backups, you highlight all the time when I say it. It's like, if you're in a position where the backup quarterback has to play significant snaps, what are you even worried about anyways? Because your season's lost. So the Bills are one of the biggest people that live in that space. If you go from Josh Allen to any backup, I don't care who it is, you are going to have some serious tough times. So the backup quarterback position to me is and has been in a good spot when it comes to Mitch Trubisky, because of what he's been capable in providing Josh Allen, Joe Brady, and the day-to-day practice structure and everything in the meeting room, whatever it is. He clearly is on the same, he sees everything in the exact same space that those guys do, that it makes a lot of sense to me. I have no problem with him coming back, and I would imagine it. I would be surprised, to be quite honest, if he doesn't.
I agree, and I would be surprised if it took the whole full $4 million. I mean, he's got a family here now. He's set up in Buffalo. He's Josh Allen's guy. You make it to the NFL, you're a next level type of competitor. Maybe there's some self-belief there that he still believes he can be the guy for a team. I mean, when you see some of these guys that get trotted out as answers every week, I'm sure he thinks he's better than some of these guys. Whether he is or not, who knows? But he also has a very comfy position where, his family's been in Buffalo, and he knows that he can be one of those backups that can play here for 5 or 6 years. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to a backup is they get on the field and the world sees how bad they are and they never get a job again. So unless you're Joe Flacco and then you get on the field and take the league by storm for a few games. So I agree. I think Mitch will come back, but if he doesn't leave, I don't think it's a massive loss by any means.
No.
All right. We're going to skip around on this list now, and we're going to have a theme with these next guys we talk about, last year's reunion guys. And let's start with Jordan Poyer. Boy, oh boy, was his absence felt in the playoff game against Denver. You could really make a strong argument that if he was healthy in that game, the Bills win that game, with a couple of the deep balls that were completed that ultimately turned the game due to injuries and guys like Dane Jackson and Darnell Savage being on the field. He is 34 years old, but Spot Track values him at $1.2 million. We're not really talking about a significant amount of money here or guarantees. I have no issue bringing Jordan Poyer back as kind of a backup to Cole Bishop. He's not going to be that deep safety next to Bishop that I think the Bills would like. But If you can get him for 1.2 million, cool. But part of me just wants to kind of see Jordan Poyer retire and go on to the TV phase of his life because I think he'll be excellent at it.
He is an individual that you're not rushing to sign, fill up a roster spot, and he's probably someone you don't want to even have projected as a roster spot going into training camp. But he's also someone I think he's even been pretty vocal with it. It's like, hey, if the Bills come calling, I'll play, but I don't think he's rushing to the phone to play anywhere else. I think he experienced what he experienced in Miami before coming back, where it was like he found that he was in a happier place with the Bills again. He was very public with that kind of stuff. And from there, he likes the guys in the locker room enough that if they were to come calling, let's say in October due to injuries or whatever is going on, I'm sure he would absolutely sign. But that's the space once again that I believe Jordan Poyer should live in. Like you had said, wouldn't mind seeing him just retire and find life after football as well, just for the benefit of him. We can't be having him be any remotely significant piece of things moving forward. As great as he was filling in last season, that needs to remain where it was, and you need to figure it out and fast how to move on forward where he doesn't need to be leaned on in any capacity for years to come.
From one potential future Wall of Famer to another, Tre'Davious White is an unrestricted free agent, and very similar to Jordan Poyer. You ask us in June, July, and August, we're all like scared to death if that guy has to get on the field. And by the end of the year, it's, oh my God, he's not on the field. We're in trouble. Um, Love Trey. I don't want him back. And here's my reason why. I expect this two starting boundary cornerbacks to be Maxwell Harrison and Christian Benford. I know. Whoa. What a massive call by me. But I want the Bills to be more forward thinking than they were under Sean McDermott, where the depth pieces were always guys that had years in the system, where it was Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson, despite how slow a foot they were. And yes, they come in and we're going to limit the amount of defensive packages we can run, but they know what they're doing. No, I want whoever the Bills draft in the third, fourth, or fifth round at cornerback to be that boundary cornerback 3, and he plays enough that he gets experience. But the Bills don't have to look at that situation if Harrison or Benford go down and say, well, we can't play man coverage now because he's in the game. Or, well, we got to shade this way. I want athletic upside with my backups at the secondary, which is something these Bills have been screaming for years. I think that's one of my biggest points of dissatisfaction with McDermott, and we'll give some of that to Bean too. He builds the roster, but I hope that's something that changes now under Brady and Jim Leonard. And that's where, as much as I love Tre'Davious White, as much as I think he deserves to be on that wall of fame, I do hope he's played his last game as a Buffalo Bill.
We share a mind. I think going through this, I see kind of, we've been sharing a lot of stuff with Trey White. It's just, as you said, he felt like he progressed through last season where you're like, thank goodness he's here, from where early on it was like, holy crap, how are we in the situation that we are where he needs to be playing meaningful snaps? But it's almost one where it was like you were playing with house money and getting away with it late last season. And you can't expect another. Mother Time is always undefeated. Time is undefeated. That is always linear. That is always factual. You cannot defeat time. In another year of Trey White going into this, like, hey, you already weren't one of those quick twitchy guys. You're getting older, and now this is for the first time in his career, for the most part. I mean, he did have that one kind of hiatus with the Rams and then the Ravens in the same season before coming back. For all of intents and purposes, you've been playing one system. You've been doing one thing and been doing it for the most part at a very high level. Great for you. As you said, this is a Wall of Fame candidate player for the Bills in the future. He is not part of the future on the field, though. There needs to be other options, other things available. And, there's another guy under the cornerback label in this free agency potential leaving that I would look at as a higher priority guy to return than a Trey White. And I love the guy, love the player, love everything he's done for the Bills. Would love to see him kind of explore life post football on the field and see what else opportunity wise is out there for him, because it just doesn't, to me, make enough sense to bring him back even on a borderline vet min deal.
I agree with you completely. All right, let's go to kickers and punters very quickly. Both Matt Prater and Mitch Wishnowsky are free agents to be. Matt Prater is going to be 42 years old when the season starts. He was nails for the Bills off the bench prior to week one, hit the game tying field goal at the buzzer in the second round of the playoffs in Denver to send that game into overtime. And Wishnowsky, to his credit, was the Bills' third option at punter this season and finished middle of the pack in most important punting metrics. So ended up being a solid addition and also kicked off for the Bills when Prater couldn't. Either one of these guys pique your interest as being brought back?
I'd be absolutely okay with Wishnowsky. I mean, I think he's been a quality punter in this league for a little bit there now. I know he's about to be 34, and it's weird. He's about to be 34, only been in the league in 7 years. But punter is also one of those things. I mean, you see guys going well into their 40s, stuff like that. He's absolutely been a quality guy around. I think he did a very good job. And randomly punter position for a good stretch there was kind of rotational in and out, whether it was due to play or health. You ended up, as you said, third option on Mitch Wishnowsky, and all of a sudden it felt like it steadied itself. And then the fact that he can be a kickoff specialist plus punter is a nice thing. And I thought he did a good job with the kickoff, trying to pin them in. Of course, the modern kickoff is all about getting it right before the goal line so that it is forcing a return. I thought he did a fair job at that, and I'm okay with that. Prater, if he wants to come back, cool, but also at the same time, you're not going to have a Prater and a Tyler Bass. Bass is still under contract. Where are you at headspace wise with Bass? Obviously drives that conversation. I would say if you're looking to save a few million by moving on from Bass after experiencing what you did with Prater last season, Prater feels like a good option if he's wanting to play, but also at the same time, you will have to absolutely test the kicker market before you come to that decision, because Prater even showed at times where once again, time is undefeated. He is north of 40. You can only do so much. And I imagine you got away with it for the most part last season. He was banged up there somewhat. That would probably rear its ugly head once again if you were to try to go through another long season with Prater as your primary kicker.
I'm with you 100%. I think Prater, a lot like the conversation we talked about with Shaq Thompson, quite honestly, Poyer, White. I think Brandon Beane had a fantastic job plugging holes on this roster where when they popped up, like injury here, find a guy, injury there, find a guy. Some of the holes were created by some of the misses he had. That is not lost on me. But I think when you look at some of the patchwork he did during the season, I think it was outstanding. And Prater is certainly in that conversation, and so is Wishnowsky. Absolutely fine if Wishnowsky is the Bills' punter last year. Would be very surprised if Prater factors in, unless the injury to Bass is worse than we all realize. All right. Bouncing around here. Let's talk about a couple depth pieces here. Let's start with Cam Lewis. Cam Lewis came in and played very well in the Denver game. I've been very high on Cam Lewis. I think he's a guy that can not only get you out of a game at all secondary positions, whether it's nickel, boundary corner, safety, or he can also be a starting level player. Now, not a difference maker, but a starting level player at safety and almost a starting level player at nickel corner. I think he's a very valuable player. Plus, he's a core special teamer. I don't know what the market is for someone like that, but I can't imagine Spot Trek has a real high number on him, 1.5 million. I mean, I'm taking that all day on Cam Lewis. But if somebody wants to get crazy and offer him $3, $4, $5 million a year to come in and be an answer or to be a high paid backup just because they're a team like the Browns and can't find players, so they want to just bring players in like Miami did with Saran Neal a few years ago, then so be it. Wish him well, happy he gets paid. But Cam Lewis is a guy I'd love to see stay.
I'd love to see Cam Lewis stay too. He was the corner I was hinting at when talking about Trey White. He's the ultimate utility, it feels like, on defense in the secondary. As you mentioned, he can play everywhere, it feels like. And it almost feels like he is as well scheme proof, right? He's truly an intellectual player. It feels like he has a good grip on things, and he can kind of, when you have to break glass in case of emergency, he will fill that role to a level that you're comfortable with, regardless of the position. I can also absolutely see it where he ends up following Babbage to Green Bay, I believe it was, or anything of that nature, just to kind of bring along whatever it is he is trying to. But that said, at 1.5 mil, if that's the projection, there is way worse ways to spend that money. And I think, especially when we're talking about safety opposite Cole Bishop, or, the potential of moving on life after Taron Johnson, whatever it is that it is, due to scheme, due to personnel, whatever, Cam Lewis can absolutely be filled in there. And if you were to go into the season being like, hey, Cam Lewis, week 1 is going to be your starting nickel, and or Cam Lewis week 1 is going to be your starting safety, are you ecstatic about it? No, probably not, but you're not overly concerned about it either. You would like to hope that they probably did something where we bring back Cam Lewis. He's going to be starting safety opposite Cole Bishop early, but also we got this guy in the 3rd round of the draft or the 4th round of the draft that we like potentially to develop in there, or signed a guy off the street that needs, we'll test the waters with him to see how it is during training camp. But our safety blanket is Cam Lewis. That feels like a really good spot to be when it comes to bringing him back, being comfortable with him, and then trying to explore that alternative if it's there, whether it's free agency or the draft, to kind of go from there. I would be A-okay with that kind of mindset and philosophy moving forward.
Couple guys here. We're going to get to Reggie Gilliam too, but I'm just going to name a few names here. Let me know what you think. Sam Franklin, very high quality special teams player, but special teams coordinator moved on. He went to Miami, so maybe that's somewhere he goes. And then also Damar Hamlin, spot starter for the Bills, never really evolved past that. Good special teams player. Either one of those guys interest you?
Nope, not at all.
Okay. Reggie Gilliam, starting fullback for this team, the ultimate push Josh got into a pile. I felt so good about these Josh Allen quarterback sneaks primarily because of Reggie Gilliam back there. I have no idea what his market value is. If somebody wants to pay him crazy money, so be it. But I can't imagine the Bills are going to have to fight off too many teams to bring back Reggie Gilliam.
Reggie Gilliam needs to come back. Reggie Gilliam is borderline just as important as your offensive line and Jackson Hawes in the run game, if not as important. He moves the needle in the sense of how efficient we can be with how James Cook's production is, how efficient the running game can be, and just ultimately the package personnel individual where, yes, he's even labeled as a fullback, but you even see him slip out as that 2nd, 3rd tight end and be capable of pass catching when, God forbid, it's necessary. So he's proven to be an absolute competent player in that fullback role, that he feels like the quote unquote modern day fullback where he is utility like. And from there, I don't see where the better option is. And you need that player in what Joe Brady wants to do in the run game. What better can you do than Reggie Gilliam? And is it going to cost you another $2 million that he was previously on? Maybe. Am I going to complain about $2 million going to Reggie Gilliam? Absolutely not. I mean, he's starting and playing more than other guys you're most likely putting at a similar dollar amount. So sure, sounds good. Feels like a perfectly appropriate amount of money to go to a Reggie Gilliam. And as you said, I don't think you're fighting off a lot of people on that as well. Would welcome back Reggie Gilliam with open arms.
The final conversation we're going to have on this free agent show is about a guy who was down the stretch the Bills' most reliable wide receiver. Brandon Cooks, a midseason addition by the Bills, ended up being their number 1 receiver, made some big catches for them. Also had a couple of big non-catches that we won't talk about right now. But Brandon Cooks is going to be 33 years old. Spotrac values him at a little less than $3 million per season. That makes sense to me. I can't see a lot of teams, despite how solid he did for the Bills, beating down his door. But what do you think about the idea? Certainly not of like, hey, come back to be the wide receiver 1, but bringing Brandon Cooks back as let's bury you at the bottom of the depth chart and make whoever we bring in this offseason prove they can at least be as good as you.
Brandon Cooks at $3 million, I am A-okay with, as being a guy who then, you could see as your 5th receiver active on game days, and also is getting 15 to 18 snaps a game in passing situations and or just utility situations where I can trust that at least he has shown he can come up with a big moment or two with Josh Allen at quarterback. And if the willingness for him to come back is there, and on top of it, you're looking at the receiver room where it currently sits, it's hard to argue that Brandon Cooks at this moment in time, sitting here mid-February, isn't one of the better pass catching options you have available to you right now. That you need to. That's why we had the episode that we did last week. The conversation is clearly going to be led by receiver, in my opinion, going into the offseason moves that are free agency in the draft. But Brandon Cooks being one of the available options on game day isn't a bad thing, in my opinion, at that number and what you have kind of at your disposal, because you have to remember that Tyrell Shavers is going to be recovering from, it was a torn ACL, if I recall. Gabe Davis is also a knee injury of his own volition. It's just, you have two guys that aren't going to be even available to you to kick off the season. Most likely, with modern science, who knows, but I would imagine it's safe to assume most likely they will not be available due to when their injuries were occurred in the wild card round. It's hard to look at it and go, oh, if we're leaning on Brandon Cooks to be one of the five guys, and again, needs to be that. And as you said, not a wide receiver one, but if you're looking at Brandon Cooks as one of the five guys active on game day, how am I going to sit here and complain about it when you saw down the stretch, how efficient and effective he was comparative to anything else you had available? Like, you have your Palmer discussion where it's like, how do we get out of that situation? You have the Curtis Samuel discussion. It's like, please get off of this roster with your dollar amount, things of that. And then I look at Brandon Cooks and it's like, if I can bring you back for $3 million, sounds good to me. That's where I'm at with Brandon Cooks. I am absolutely fine with seeing Brandon Cooks come back if he wants to at that dollar amount. No qualms whatsoever.
I agree with you. And the other wide receiver you didn't hear us mention, Gabe Davis, he has a long road back from the injury he suffered in the Bills playoff run. And if he can get back in time for training camp or next season to compete, great. But the Bills can't put any eggs in that basket. All right, Luka. Well, the next time we talk will be, the end of February. We're getting very close to free agency starting. We're going to start to get some answers. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the Bills extend a couple of these players before we get to that point. I wouldn't expect anything major. Maybe McGovern will be the biggest one if they do it, but we are trucking along. Anything else you'd like to add before we get out of here?
No, I'm just very much looking forward to combine time, even because as we approach the draft, as least excited as I am about this draft comparative to years past of recent, the combine is going to be maybe one of the more intriguing ones to me, because I feel as if the shuffle on the big board could change as much as it ever has. Just, there is some top end in this draft for everyone to understand, but boy, is there a serious fall off after the few up top. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for guys. The antithesis of it all to me is you have a serious discussion between three guys on who the best receiver is. And I think they are all extremely close and neck to a lot of individuals. I have my own biases in that discussion. And
no,
I know Josh doesn't even share who my number one wide receiver would be. And that's a-okay, because I think the discussion that's there is absolutely valid. And there is a lot of things to like about a lot of these guys that, it's going to be hard to see eye to eye. And the combine is your first time where maybe you can create that separation and or see who stands out. And this will be one that I think a lot of guys that are going to be there will recognize the opportunity that's in front of them in that regard. So very excited that that's around the corner, and that hopefully can maybe stoke the flames going into draft season. That gets me excited again, like it usually does.
Excited for it, and we'll be here for all of it. And maybe at some point during free agency, I'll ask Luka if the Bills should send a second-round pick for a kicker. That conversation will be happening at some point on Bills Chat. But for Luka, I am Josh McCarty. Go USA! The women's team took down Canada. We're recording this on Friday. We don't know what happens with the men's team. They are in the semifinals. Go USA! The Olympics have been fun to watch. And we will talk to you next time on Bills Chat.